Alrighty, hello and welcome. If you've never met me, my name is Cam Barnard. I'm a product director for VertiGIS Studio. Thanks for taking time out of your day today to join us for the VertiGIS Studio Road Ahead webinar, roughly 45 minutes long. Some demos, some sneak peeks on some things you may not have seen yet, updates and the like. Questions are more than welcome. Please put those into the chat. I'm pretty good about getting back to you within a day or so. And I just want to start off by saying thank you. Sometimes when you ask questions, I also come back to you with a question or clarification. You guys are awesome about answering those along the way, so much appreciated. Away we go. It is Thursday, August the 3rd, and this is the VertiGIS Studio Road Ahead webinar. Starting off with a few announcements and updates, I wanted to kick it off with the Esri User Conference. Fantastic turnout this year. It was great to see so many of you in person. We were super busy at the booth, lots and lots of demos, updates for customers around VertiGIS Studio. We also did quite a lot of demos around VertiGIS Networks, VertiGIS FM, and had lots of telco conversations this time around as well. The picnic was, as is always, very enjoyable. So if you were able to make it to that, very, very welcome. And yeah, just a great event. Great to see so many people there. Wanted to give you a quick update around security and SOC 2. So you've probably seen in the past me update around SOC 2. We finished our SOC 2 Type 1 audit a year and a half ago. That is basically saying, the auditor says, hey, you've got all your required procedures and policies in place, and then you go into a Type 2 audit period where you actually follow all those policies and procedures, and then they confirm that you've done that. So we did successfully complete our SOC 2 Type 2 audit in June of 2023. There's a blog post up on our blog if you'd like more information about that, but just really exciting from my point of view, a lot of work by a lot of people to make that happen. So what you should take away from this for your organizations is we're thinking about security, we're thinking about the protection of both our information and your information, and we're someone that you can rely on in that regard. So congratulations to everyone there. ArcGIS Enterprise 11.1, hopefully this should be my last update on this. I've talked about it a couple times in the past. You can see the list of compatible products, and there were two caveats. The first caveat was you were going to need a new version of access control if you want to run ArcGIS Enterprise 11.1. That, of course, has now been released. That is VertiGIS Studio Access Control version 5.6. And there was a second caveat, which was a particular extension or offering that we had called Web Adapter Extensions. It was to address a very specific security pattern where it's on-prem. There's a server involved, you're using integrated Windows authentication, and you have anonymous access disabled. Last time I did this update, we did not have a solution for you there. We have since figured out a solution and posted it up onto GitHub so that you can download it and install it from there. Installation instructions and the like are there. So with that, all aspects of VertiGIS Studio are back to being fully compliant with ArcGIS Enterprise 11.1. Also wanted to give you a brief update about our VertiGIS Studio support and community. As you know, a little while ago, we moved from community.vertigis.com to support.vertigis.com. All the content got migrated over. For the most part, that should be a pretty seamless move for you. Two things that are coming that I thought were worth mentioning. The first is we are working right now to connect the support community to our existing VertiGIS Studio documentation. So when you are in the community searching for something, if there's something relevant in our documentation, you should also be offered that as a way to gain that information. And secondly, we are in the process of organizing our support.vertigis.com site to also support software downloads. You'll see this come live just as soon as it's ready. As long as you are accessing downloads from apps.vertigisstudio.com/downloads, you will be automatically redirected to the new location as soon as it is available. So a couple of things there. I also recorded a little GIF for you. We are trying always to improve navigation, how to find information on this site. We actually spend quite a bit of time thinking about it. And I just wanted to show you the tip that I use for kind of narrowing down how to get there. So I recorded a little GIF for you. You can see I'm looking for scale bar. I've got well over 1,000 results. So I'm going to go to VertiGIS support, and then I'm going to go to community, and then select the topic I'm interested in, which in this case is web. And now I'm down to 24 results. So you can get a very broad search down to a pretty narrow set of results by using that left-hand source and then ultimately type navigation. So if you haven't found those controls yet, I've found them to be super helpful for finding what I'm looking for. All right, into the technology updates and road ahead. We'll kick it off with past. So several software releases since we last spoke to each other, including printing and reporting maintenance releases and some other stuff. But before, I specifically wanted to call out today our Search 1.1. So this was released mid-June, June 19th. There are some brand new options there around scheduled rebuilds and being able to use alternate fields for the unique identifier. This is toward our march, and you'll see in some of my other slides, we're talking about what's still to come in search, but we're making great progress there. You saw Web 524 released June the 21st. This included the query tool, filter tool, project sharing, guided upload experience, and more. You saw Analytics 1.2 released June 22nd. This had new functionality around alarms and table filtering. And you saw a new version of Workflow 534 on July the 17th. This included the final bits of moving all the forms within Workflow display form over to Material UI 5, as well as a new activity to add geo-reference data to your PDFs. Now, some of these things weren't ready to demo last time we did a road ahead, so I wanted to do a quick demo of two of these, one around web and the query filter tool, and one around analytics. So let's dive right in. Here we are in VertiGIS Studio Web, and I wanted to quickly show you the query tool and the filter tool because I did not get to demo those last time. So we're going to start off with our query tool, and I want to do some queries around looking for specific types of water lines. Interestingly enough, though, I'll come back to this. You can see this is my default view in the map, and if I zoom out far enough, of course, we've got scale control so that you don't see data like buildings or fire hydrants and water lines until you get further in. But of course, we have this fantastic thing called layer presets, and what I've done is I've created a water network preset that puts a bit more of a light gray base map. If you zoom way in, you can see I still have building footprints, but very, very transparent. And I've changed the scale range on my water network so that we can do something a little more interesting. So let's do a query on water lines. And what I want to do is I'm looking for a particular type of pipe of a particular diameter installed before a certain date. So let's kick it off with material. And I'm going to do a material contains query. I'm looking for ductile. And if I start to run this query, you can see that it's going to find a certain amount of that. That's more than I'm looking for. So let's build this condition out even more. I'm looking for particular diameters. And I'm going to make, I'm looking for diameters that are 250 or diameters that are 300. And let's add my last condition in here. I'm specifically looking for things that have an installation date before January 1st, 1990. So if I run that query, I now have exactly 56 of these things in my network, and I can zoom in a little bit and see that there's a bunch of them over here in the West Victoria Esquimalt area, and in a few other places kind of in the downtown core. Don't really have anything in this vicinity. And of course, using existing functionality, if I want to, I can add that query to my starred results. I now have a record of those, and I can go along and do a subsequent query. So that is the new Query Builder query tool. a fantastic way to find very specific data within your application. I'm going to switch back to my default view, and I want to show you a little bit around the filter tool as well. The filter tool has a very similar kind of interface. The big difference is what you're filtering is what's visible on the map. So in this particular case, I'm going to look at actual use, and I'm particularly interested in, we'll start off with hotels, only interested in seeing buildings that are being currently used as a hotel, and I can see a little bit up here and some down here, but I'm going to add a second condition and also look for office space, and we'll apply both of those, and you get the idea. What you're doing is you're actually changing a visibility mask on your data on the map in order to make it easier to see the things that meet your filter. So that query tool and that filter tool were released in the June release of VertiGIS Studio Web, and if you haven't upgraded or haven't had a chance to try those yet, now you've seen them. The second thing I want to show you is some of the alarms and table filtering that we put into analytics. So alarms are now available. This is part of a demo system that someone gave me access to. They didn't trust me enough to give me, like, settings access, so I can't actually go into the alarm definitions, but there's some alarms set for me, and you can begin to see how those are bubbled up here. I've got one server that's okay, one that is in an info state, and one that is in an error state. If I was to drill in to the server that is in an error state, I can very quickly see that this is around memory usage. And if I go into my trends and change this, last 7 days actually sounds just fine. We'll go ahead and use that. And I go down to my memory usage. I can see pretty consistently that I'm up at 90% or more. And if I scroll all the way down, this is one of the things I wanted to make sure that you could see. There's a brand new table in almost all views that kind of show you alarm over time. And so in order to make that a little bit more interesting, I was digging around and I found a really interesting example from a particular app. And if I scroll all the way down to the bottom for my alarms view, and make sure we're looking at the right data. Thought I was. Oh, it's this one that I was looking at. So in my production view of my government VertiGIS Studio web app, you can see when these alarms were active and for what duration they were active. And you can see in this particular example, it was enough to trip my info thresholds, but not enough to trip my warning or my error thresholds. So this new view for alarms in your data makes it quite easy to come back and kind of see when alarms were on, when they were off, and how they were fired. So that is one example from analytics around alarms, but I also wanted to show you a table filtering example. And so what I'm going to do for that is in this same view, and actually 7 days is probably just fine, I'm going to go to usage. So I've got this usage graph here. It's a large table. I'm going to bring up my tabular view, change my items per page to 20 so that I can see some stuff. And what you would normally use this particular table for is to get a better sense of what kinds of things are people doing in your application. Well, that's very interesting. But I was starting to drill into this a little bit using table filtering, and I was like, you know what I'm really interested in? I'm really interested in things that have failed. So I actually went down and I looked for status, I believe is what I was looking for, that is not equal to success. And I'm going to apply that. So I can now see a list of all things, both in the graph and in the table, where things were not successful. And I was particularly interested in adding a second filter to this, where I'm actually interested in things where my duration was greater than 500 milliseconds. And go ahead and apply that. And now I can see, okay, I've got this particular workflow. Now let's turn off the grouping and I can start to see individual examples of, I've got this filter work orders by map extent. And most often the reason for failure appears to be that the user is canceling. So I went and dug into that workflow a little bit and realized lots of people were just starting that workflow, having a look at the first screen and then canceling it. So I was able to kind of track that down by using table filtering and analytics. So that is new to analytics if you haven't seen it yet. All right, what are some of the things that we are currently finalizing? So these are things that are fairly far along. They're either in final QA regression testing or in the middle of the final versions of development. The first one I wanted to point out to you is for VertiGIS Inline. And in VertiGIS Inline, we are about to release, and when I say about, it's like almost through regression test. It should be out any day now. A new feature called cross sections. And I thought this one was both worth a quick look because I know many of you don't have inline and may not have upgraded to the latest version if you do use inline. So I thought this one was worth a quick show and tell as well. So here I am in a VertiGIS inline. And you can see I've got a route already selected. This is a transportation example. And you can see as I move along the line, I'm looking at an overhead view of the road. I can see where the lanes expand, where the signs are, where the speed limits are, and the like. The request that we had, and I think there are other examples outside of transportation, is sometimes you also want a cross-section view. So if you think about a road network, you're looking at the top view of the road and kind of how it looks there. But what if you want to see the compositional underneath, the cross section, the opposite axis view? And in those cases, we are just about to release this, where you can see the cross section. And what I want to show you is you can see where I am currently on the road. When you open this view, you get the cross section view, you get a little caret showing you exactly where you opened it. And you can see obviously as I'm moving my mouse along here, I can interact with the compositional view below, but that's not changing my position on the map because what I'm looking at is oriented in the other axis. So this is something that folks, particularly in the transportation industry, but I think it would also apply to rail and other industries as well, have been asking for, and we are pleased that this is just about to ship. All right, search. Let's talk about VertiGIS Studio Search. We continue to work on VertiGIS Studio Search. It is getting closer and closer to what I would call a launch-ready state. This is where it's got enough functionality that we're like, everyone should be using this. So what we're doing, there's a release coming up in September. We're putting support in for subdomains. This is allowing your SaaS version of search to interact with your on-prem ArcGIS Enterprise portal data. And we're also adding all our delta indexing strategies in. So this was always a big selling point for VertiGIS Studio Search over the historical version of Instant Search inside GeoCortex Essentials. For those of you that are using that, you know there was no delta indexing strategies. You pretty much always had to fully re-index your data. When we moved to VertiGIS Studio Search, one of the things we really wanted to address is how do I keep my data more or less up to date all the time without having to continually re-index it. So we've got 3 delta indexing strategies that we're working on. One is based on an API request. This is going to be ultimately integrated directly back into VertiGIS Studio Web. So you do an edit inside VertiGIS Studio Web. VertiGIS Studio Web is connected to VertiGIS Studio Search. It's smart enough to know, hey, I just changed this data. It sends something to search. It says, could you please re-index just this one record, as an example. Esri obviously has some functionality around editor tracking. And when you turn that functionality on for your feature service, VertiGIS Studio Search will be able to monitor that based on how Esri has built it and do delta indexes on those records as you update them. And then lastly, there will be a mechanism for doing this based on a custom date change field. This is where you say, hey, VertiGIS Studio Search, I want you to pay attention to this particular date field. And then you are ultimately responsible for creating a database trigger or doing some other logic that decides when it's time to update that field. But the moment that date field updates, we will then reindex that particular record. So excited to see these delta indexing strategies come to life. I'm super excited for that. Let's talk about mobile. There is an updated version of VertiGIS Studio Mobile coming out in August. This includes a few things. It includes a new version of ArcGIS Runtime SDK for .NET. So Esri released a point update, 100.15.2 with a few small fixes. So we thought it was a good idea. Again, generally speaking, here at VertiGIS, we have a commitment to you that we're going to do our very best to keep you on the latest version of Esri technology in a way that's relatively painless for you. So we've gone ahead and incorporated that. There is a new command as part of VertiGIS Studio Mobile that is kind of a workflow cancel all. This is a little bit of a brute force command, but there were some really specific customer and services implementations where you wanted to be sure that there wasn't anything running. So we've gone ahead and added that command. It will shut down all active workflows. And of course, there's, as always, supports to fix customer implementations and other things that are going on. So that is the upcoming version of VertiGIS Studio Mobile 5.25 to be released in August. Also, just being finalized, we should have our release candidate cut today. I think the team is literally working on it while I'm presenting. We have coming in August a 5.25 version of Web. What is in this? Well, first of all, we've updated to workflow 5.34. What is that? Why is that important? Well, there's lots of cool stuff in there, of course, as always, but the big change that we're super excited about is that all the work that's been done in workflow to move the workflow display form activity over to Material UI 5 will be realized at this release. So lots of benefits to you, including things like being able to work directly in the workflow designer, looking at web and actually using commands and things that wouldn't have previously worked inside the workflow sandbox, and then absolute consistency from your sandbox view of your workflow to your running that same workflow within VertiGIS Studio Web. So we're pretty excited about that one. We are adding designer configuration for drawing symbol presets. So this is the big idea where for drawing for your application, maybe you're creating an application servicing your parks crew at your municipal government. You might want to pre-create some symbol presets that they can choose from. This is a park polygon, this is a service area polygon, etc. Name them, pre-color them, and then you just kind of get this paper list. This is functionality that we obviously had within GeoCortex Essentials and the GeoCortex Viewer for HTML5. It's been available behind the scenes in web for a little while, and we're putting the configuration interface in place so that they are easy for you to build and configure. We are also going to be releasing one-to-one data links. So data linking's been out for a couple releases now. The initial release of data linking was focused on the one-to-many relationship, where you want to go to some other data source and treat it like it is a set of related records to the feature that you're looking at. But there is another use case. It's not quite as common, but it is an important one. And that is, what if I have a single feature and I want to go away and collect data and just bring it right in as attribute data? So I want it to show up in my attributes list, in my feature details view, or in my results table view. So that pattern is also being released in the upcoming release. We are also going to be releasing a generic event configuration pattern. This is something that is mostly used by services and partners, but you should be aware of it. We continually get requests, oh, it would be so great if I could tap into this specific event. And we've pre-built some of them into the designer interface, but what we've done is we've gone ahead and created a generic pattern for this, where you can say, I just want to tap into this specific event, and whenever this event fires, I want to do this action. And so that's going to be available to you coming up soon. And we've also added an advanced query toolbox. This is kind of a quick select to allow you to build out your own advanced queries from predefined snippets, and it understands all the SQL, Esri-like SQL formats that make up a query. So some really great functionality coming out in this next version of VertiGIS Studio Web. Let's talk about future stuff, roadmap. I know that's something that's always of interest to folks. Where are we going? What's coming next? What are we working on? So these things are certainly not coming out in the next release, but we are definitely working on them. So let's go back and talk about search. We do plan with a release in search before the end of this year on finishing a full integration between VertiGIS Studio Web and VertiGIS Studio Search. So what is that going to look like? You'll be inside VertiGIS Studio Web Designer building your app. You'll be looking at a particular layer in your map and you'll say, hey, I would like that layer right there to participate with VertiGIS Studio Search. And behind the scenes, Web Designer will be smart enough to go, do I already have a VertiGIS Studio Search app config set up? No, I don't. Better create one. Have I already created resource configuration for this layer? No, I don't have that. Okay, I better create that. And so it's going to be almost down to just turn it on inside VertiGIS Studio Web Designer and it just works. We'll of course give you a link there where you can link over to the VertiGIS Studio Search Designer if you want to make some tweaks, but we're at the point where we think we've got a good set of defaults so that most of the time you probably don't even need to do that. We are also obviously going to need to make a number of updates to the search component, and particularly how the previews of your search suggestions appear in your search widget inside VertiGIS Studio Web for end users. That needs to be able to show suggestions from VertiGIS Studio Search, needs to be able to organize them well, make it obvious what you're looking at. And so we've started that work as well. And yeah, pretty excited about it. Taking longer than I would like, but I'm really happy with the direction it's going. So I guess I'm content to be patient and wait for it to be done. Let's talk about the future of mobile. What is the mobile team working on? Probably no big surprise here. I think I've talked about it before. There is a future release coming of VertiGIS Studio Mobile that is based on Esri's brand new ArcGIS Maps SDK for .NET 200.x, also known as MAUI. This is part of, our commitment to you. Are you on the latest technology? This is going to be a zero effort upgrade on your part. In other words, you're simply going to pick up the latest version of mobile. It's going to be based on this technology and your app just works. In order to make that happen, there's a lot of effort that goes on behind the scenes, and basically the entire team is now working on the remaining tasks. Lots of benefits here in terms of better performance and access to some new capabilities that we're excited about, like doing disconnected utility network traces. In terms of progress, we actually do have an early working build of this running on devices around the office. It certainly still needs a little bit of work, but we've made some substantial progress in this area. So for us, it was really exciting to be able to see it, actually run it, start to see what it's going to feel like as a VertiGIS Studio Mobile or VertiGIS Studio Go application. So that is still coming. Let's talk about what's coming in web. Arriving soon. We've talked about most of these things already. The one-to-one data linking, the drawing palette preset config, advanced query toolbox, the generic event handler pattern. There's also a couple of smaller things coming as well, including some more display options for tabs. Nothing too revolutionary here, but super helpful. So this is the kind of behavior that you're used to seeing, say, on a button, where you can say, I just want an icon, or I want an icon in text, or I just want text. Tabs did not have that degree of configurability in terms of what showed up in the tabs themselves. We thought it was a good idea, and we had a couple of prototype or proof of concept apps where we actually really wanted a vertical toolbar that just had icons in it, for example, and we realized actually there wasn't any way to do that. So there's some more display options coming for tabs. And we've also made some updates to make the embedded app authorization even easier. If you're doing embedding, this is definitely something to pay attention to in the upcoming release, and you can check the release notes out for more information. What about things that are in progress? These are things that we're actively working on that weren't quite ready for the August release, but are not too far behind. One of the big ones is app startup performance overhaul. We literally completely tore apart and completely rebuild the whole app startup work. Loving it. It is, I think our startup payload now is less than a third the size of what it used to be, which of course translates to massive improvements in performance. Really, really excited. We've also done some work here around, I would call it perceived performance. So allowing certain things to appear in the application, even if not all aspects of it are available yet, so that you see things happening as the app is loading. This one is a fairly big change, so we're doing some extra QA around it, and we found a few things that we needed to fix and polish up, so it wasn't quite ready for this August release, but it is coming along very, very well, and I know many of you are excited about that and waiting for it. We're also working on some functionality around saved query by, so your application administrator, probably yourself. Sometimes you want to put simple queries in front of your end users. You're going to write a complex query like maybe the ones that I did for the ductile water thing, and you want one input field by your end user. Okay, I want to give the end users the ability to put a different date in here, but they don't need to see the whole query builder. They don't want to see how that's all structured. What they want is a simple little form that says, hey, here's your ductile search feature, pop your data in here and we'll find those things for you on the map. You give it a little instruction in a single field. They enter that field, they hit enter, and it does that query. So it's these very nice, very simple little query interfaces for end users. That one is coming along. We're also adding a UI for adding or creating new related records. We support related records today. We even support editing of related records, but so far we hadn't given you a way of creating new ones. So I've got inspections on fire hydrants, for example. I can view them. I can even edit them. But wait, Cam, I want to add a new inspection record. That's a good point. That's what this UI will let you do. We've begun looking at the layer aliasing and layer label settings. So this is your ability to change aliases of layers and to dynamically change the labeling of layers. I know several of you have been asking about that feature. And updating a feature on an external event. There are examples within the Esri APIs where you can make changes to something and you know you've made a change to something, and currently there wasn't really any way to tell web, I changed this feature, please reload this feature to reflect those changes, because often they're not picked up automatically. So there's something in progress there. We're also working on some more display options for buttons, different sizes, different colors. You continue to find really interesting use cases where, hey, I've got this really cool app, look at my layout, I love it, but I want a big green button and a big red button. How do I do that? Things like that. And navigate to previous and next extent, which again is something that a few of you have been asking about, is also work in progress. So coming soon, coming probably the release after that, or at least most of it. And from a release calendar point of view, here's what it looks like. We released Essentials 4.15 in June. There is a small point release coming for that. A couple of you very quickly said, hey, there's actually an error in one of the configuration files. You can find the thread on the community that was affecting some folks. So we do have a plan, probably end of August release of a 4.15.1 of GeoCortex Essentials and the GeoCortex Viewer for HTML5 that includes an updated version of that config file. We'd love to get that out sooner, but vacations and availability of QA resources means it's going to be closer to the end of August. You saw that we've recently released a 1.2 version of analytics. There is a 1.3 version coming with some new stuff that we're excited about. And then you've got the regular cadence of workflow, reporting, printing coming along. Here was your 5.24 version of web. Here's your upcoming August release. And yes, we are working on a 5.26 for October and a 5.27 for December. The inline 2.5, I thought it was going to get out by the end of July. It looks like it's going to bleed over into the first couple of days of August since it's not actually out. And hey, look, it's August. And then search, we talked about the 1.2 release with the Delta indexing coming out in September. And we do have a release planned before the end of this year that has the full VertiGIS Studio web integration. So that is a snapshot of your release calendar for VertiGIS Studio. I am going to have a super quick look. I'll leave this up on the screen. I think that was my last slide, but I know sometimes you guys like to study this and have a quick look to see if there are any questions I can do live. And if I don't get to them live, I try really, really hard to get to them shortly thereafter. So let's have a look. Good question here. I'll try and do a couple of them, and you will still get a written response to these as well. What are the plans for the query filter tools to have sort of autocomplete? Yes, absolutely, it is planned. It is coming. We started working on it, but it's taking a little bit of time. Yes. Also a question about the VertiGIS Studio search itself and the integration to web. So as you know, currently, the way you integrate with that is with the workflow that we provided. The question in essence is that going to continue or is that going to be different in the future? It's absolutely going to be different in the future. It'll be integrated directly into the existing search component. Right, I'm gonna let you guys go. I will absolutely answer all the rest of your questions in written form. I know you're busy. I know there's lots going on at your various workplaces, so I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me to look at this update and learn a little bit more about what is coming in VertiGIS Studio Search and what we've recently released and VertiGIS Studio in general. And I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate your questions and thanks. Have a most awesome afternoon and we will talk to you all very soon.